Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. We've got 6 new cards to take a look at. So let's see the first one now. This is actually a dragon. Finally we do have a new dragon. This one's a little bit underwhelming. It's pretty good in its own right, but let me go through the details. It's called Crowd Roaster and it's an epic dragon. It costs 7 mana, has 7 attack and 4 health, and it has a battle cry. If you're holding a dragon, deals 7 damage to an enemy minion. So it is just minions. You can't do 7 damage to face, which is quite important here, I think. And instantly you would probably compare this with the elemental Blaze Caller. Now Blaze Caller is a 6/6 and it does 5 damage, not 7, and that 5 damage can also go face. I think actually looking at these two cards, I think you can compare them because they both have to go into specific decks and they both have a similar effect. I would say that probably the Blaze Caller is the better card. One, because I think it's easier to activate. You would usually play more elementals in an elemental deck than you would dragons in a dragon deck. And the damage can go face, which is actually quite important. 5 damage burst to your opponent's face can be really important at certain parts of the game. So and then finally, and probably most importantly, the stats I think are better distributed on the Blaze Caller. I think you would sacrifice the 2 damage that you can do to a minion to actually have the 6/6 stats, because the Crowd Roaster is at the very high, at the very top. Play with this, you would play it for 7 mana, you would kill a big minion on your opponent's side of the board. They wouldn't be able to answer it, and then next turn you can trade your Crowd Roaster in and kill another big minion. So that's kind of trading 2 cards for 2 of your opponent's cards for 1 of yours. So that is a really kind of strong play. But in reality, 7 damage to a minion, unless they're already damaged, it doesn't kill giants, it doesn't kill Lich King, it doesn't kill a lot of the bigger minions. Yes, 7 damage is a lot of damage to do to an enemy minion, but if you're going to have to trade with it, I think the 5 damage from the Blaze Caller is probably going to be enough in a lot of instances if you're trading another minion. That being said, it is better. 7 damage is better than 5, so there could be some good uses. But the problem is when you play it on the board, the 4 health kind of means that it's very easily destroyed. It dies to a lot of AoE. It can be traded into by very small minions to kill. So that's kind of the downside. But if your opponent doesn't have those, the 7 attack is very high. So 1, if they can't kill it, you could go face with that 7 attack, and 2, if they can't kill it, it's kind of another efficient trade for you to use. So we did get another dragon. Again, I'm going to preface this by saying that if this is going to see any play, we do need to see more dragons, because at the moment the dragons that are in the game right now don't seem like enough to want you to put this into your deck as another dragon. There needs to be more. There needs to be more synergies. Yes, the effect's pretty good, but I think at the moment there's a few downsides. So if I was to rate this card, I would probably say 3 out of 5. You could potentially push it to a 4 out of 5 if there are more cards to support it and depending on the meta. Next up, we've got Call of the Master. This is an epic spell for Hunter, and actually I think is a very good card. It costs 3 mana. And what it does is it discovers a minion from your deck. So it gives you 3 choices of minions from your deck, and you draw all 3 cards if all 3 of those discovered minions are beasts. So this has a huge upside of being 3 mana, draw 3. That's really, really strong. A very, very good card, and it works really well in Hunter because Hunter struggles late game. Because often they're top decking. If you top deck this, suddenly you can refill your hands with a little bit of extra with some beasts. Now, they don't have this problem currently because of Deathstalker Rexar. Deathstalker Rexar's hero power is so strong that when you get to this stage of the game with Hunter, they can just transform their game plan and just keep building beasts. Well, he's going to rotate out after 1 expansion, so this is a good option to be able to help hunters in the late game to draw some extra cards. It works very similarly to Tracking. Tracking only costs 1 mana and is played in quite a lot of hunter decks to solve this card draw problem. But that lets you discover 3 cards that don't have to be minions, and then you discard 2 of them, so there's a downside. This one, I think 3 mana, if you were to discover a minion and all 3 of them weren't beasts, you just get 1 card. That's kind of okay because the fact that it's discovering 3 minions from the deck, it means those 3 minions will be good because you put them in your deck, and it's a way that you could kind of fish out a specific minion you want, like Houndmaster Shaw, for example, for that situation on the board. So it has a lot of positives. I think it doesn't work with Death Rattle Hunter as we know it today. It works against Katharina Winterwisp because you don't want your beasts in your hand. You want them to come out with Katharina because you get those extra tempo plays. But I quite like that because the Death Rattle Hunter deck as we know it today has been overplayed. So it would be nice to see some cards that support a different kind of Hunter deck, so maybe we don't have to recycle the same meta that we've played for the last couple of expansions. So I think a deck like Midrange Hunter would like this card because they do play a lot of beasts, and they're not beasts that are getting recruited out. They're ones that you want in your hand that you can play on the board. So it's a pretty cool card that you could play in that deck. Also, we haven't seen the Loa for Hunter yet, so that could be a beast. More than likely it will be a beast, so that's something that we could synergize here. So I think this is a great card and one to look out for Hunter. Next, let's take a look at the Spirit for Shaman. This is called Spirit of the Frog. It costs 3 mana, so a bit more on the expensive side of the spirits that we've seen. It has stealth for 1 turn, like always. Whenever you cast a spell, draw a spell from your deck that costs 1 more. So this is worded a little bit weirdly. It doesn't increase the cost of your spells that you draw. What it does is it draws a spell that costs 1 mana more than the spell that you previously played. So for example, if you play a 0 mana spell, it will draw a 1 mana spell from your deck, and then it can chain. So it will constantly chain every spell that you cast. So you can see there's some pretty cool possibilities, and there are a lot of Shaman spells you could play here. So let's take a quick look at some of the spells that are available to Shaman. And of course you can start with 0 mana spells, so you could potentially use a Zap or Beaked Lightning. One of those two would work quite well. Don't forget you'd have to take note of the Overload, which could work well in an Overload Shaman deck if that's kind of what you're looking at. On to 1 mana spells, there's a couple of good ones here. I think Lightning Bolt might be the best. Volcanic Burst could be good that you've drawn from your deck. Then moving on to 2 mana spells, which is probably a little bit of a weak spot, but Crushing Hand would be a good one if you're looking at board clears. The Might could also be quite good depending on if you've got elementals in your deck. Rockbiter is another one which could work if minions are on the board. Then you would draw a 3 mana spell, and of course Lava Burst is a very good 3 mana spell which can give you burst damage to your opponent's face. Healing Rain could be useful. Lightning Storm good for board clears. And then when you look at 4 mana spells, potentially you would use a Hex or a Tidal Surge. I'm not so sure about Tidal Surge, but Hex. And then you would draw a 5 mana spell which you wouldn't be able to play in the same turn, but you would draw it. So that's one advantage of it. You'd have it in your hand for the next turn. So you can see the potential here, and if you're not using it to chain spells, you could potentially use it as an alternative to Mana Tide Totem. So Mana Tide Totem is exactly the same mana cost and stats, and it draws a card at the end of your turn. Well, potentially if you're using Spirit of the Frog, it's an easier way to draw spells. So you're not necessarily looking to play all these spells in the same turn, you're just looking to draw a card every time you cast a spell. Mana Tide Totem, if your opponent doesn't kill it, you can assume that you're going to get maybe 2 cards, usually only 1. Well, if you're playing Spirit of the Frog, if you play it properly, you should be able to draw at least 2 spells, potentially 3, which then means it is better than a Mana Tide Totem, potentially. So it's a good way to draw cards for Shaman. I don't see it being a very strong deck right now. I don't see it being particularly good. We haven't seen the Loa for Shaman yet, so maybe that is something we need to look forward to, but an interesting card nonetheless. Next up, let's look at the Legendary Loa for Warrior. This one's called Alkali the Rhino. Now, he costs 8 mana. He is legendary, of course. Has 5 attack, 5 health. It's a beast, and it has Rush and Overkill, and the Overkill is effect, draw a Rush minion, and then give it +5/+5. So this is a very, very good effect, really strong. Just think potentially if you could draw Ziliax from your deck and give it +5/+5. Darius Crowley, +5/+5, again very good. Also Undasta, maybe you could give +5/+5 to Undasta. I think that's probably not very good in Warrior. I don't see many a Warrior Beast deck happening at the moment, but the other 2 examples are pretty good. However, Alkali the Rhino costs 8 mana, so that's there's a lot of mana to play. When you draw the minion, it just puts it in your hand, it doesn't recruit it. And it only has 5 attack, so it's difficult to get the overkill effect to trigger. To overkill with this card, the minion you're attacking needs to have 4 or less health. So either you have to make some trades on that turn or use some of your other mana to deal some damage. And of course this costs 8 mana, so you've only got 2 spare mana if you've got 10 for that turn. So it's going to be difficult to make work. You could potentially recruit this with Gather Your Party or the Woe Cleaver. Those two this would be a good card to recruit because rush cards are always good to recruit. Problem with that is that you're not going to guarantee getting Alkali the Rhino out. If you're playing Alkali the Rhino, you want to play a few other minions to buff. So when you play Gather Your Party, you might actually gather those other ones. So at the moment, I don't see too many good uses for this. The attack's just too low for me and too high in mana cost. That being said, we haven't seen all the cards from the set yet, so there could be something that will work really well with this. It is a beast, so you can buff it with the Untamed Beastmaster. That would be quite difficult in Warrior, but you can. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this one plays out, but I can't really see it being playable right now. Next, let's take a look at an epic spell for Druid. This one costs 6 mana, it's called Stampeding Roar, and it summons a random beast from your hand and it gives it Rush. So I quite like this spell. I think there's some really cool implications you can use for this. It does have to summon a beast, so there are a couple of things you instantly think about. Tyrannus in Druid would be very good. If you've got Tyrannus in your hand, you summon this for 6 mana and give it Rush. That's a huge tempo play. It's also another way to potentially activate your Hadronox, because one of the downsides of a Taunt Druid is when you play your Hadronox, you don't want it to get silenced, so you have to naturalize it yourself. Well, if your opponent's got a big minion on the board, you could play Stampeding Roar, give your Hadronox Rush, and then trade it in, and then it summons all your Taunt minions before it can be silenced. So that is one good use of it. I think that's probably a bit too much of a stretch to go into Taunt Druid, but it could be used that way. But it also synergizes very well with Predatory Instincts, which is another new card coming to the expansion. And that card draws you a beast and doubles its health. So let's say you've got Tyrannus in your deck. You play Predatory Instincts, you draw Tyrannus, he gets 24 health, then you play Stampeding Roar, he comes onto the board with Rush, and that is a huge play for 10 mana. Another card you could use this with is the Giant Anaconda. That is the 5/3 that has a Death Rattle of recruit a minion with 5 or more attack from your hand. So that's probably quite a good play as well, in that you could play this for 6 mana. Initially it's not that great, but then when the Death Rattle summons a big minion, it doesn't have to summon a beast, it could summon any other big minion you've got in your hand that you want to play out cheaply. So for 6 mana you get this 5 attack rush minion, it trades in, potentially kills a minion, and then you summon another big +5 attack minion from your hand, all of that just for 6 mana. So there's some pretty cool concepts you can use here. I don't think there are, other than the beasts I mentioned, I don't think there's many good ones for Druid that you would use. Undasto is one. You play Stampeding Roar first, get the Anaconda out of your hand, then you play Predatory Instincts, get Undasto in your hand, then you trade it in, and then Undasta comes out with Rush as well that can recruit more beasts. So you can see lots of cool possibilities. I quite like it. Anything that can give you these big value plays can often see good play and constructed. So building the right deck around this could be quite positive. And finally for today we've got War Druid Loti. This is the champion for Druid, and Harry, if you're watching, we got this completely wrong. We were trying to guess in the comments what we thought this might be. I thought it would probably synergize with the hero power, and so did Harry, and it obviously doesn't. This one costs 3 mana, has 1 attack and 2 health, but it has the effect of choose one, transform into one of Loti's 4 dinosaur forms. So there are 4 choices when you play this. And the choose one cards in Druid are generally very good. Choosing one is, the adaptability of being able to choose one thing is really, really strong. However, I don't really see too much great about this card, considering it's a legendary and you can only put 1 in your deck. I don't think any of the things that you can summon with this are particularly good. Yes, remember the flexibility is going to add to the power level of this card, but let's look at the options. The first one is you can choose, so you get, when you play it, You get all 4 options on the board. You just get to pick one of them. You can pick War Druid Loti as a poisonous stealth minion with 1 attack and 2 health. That's okay. 3 mana. That's very similar to the Giant Wasp, which has seen play before. Poisonous stealth is good to be able to use to kill a big minion the turn after you play it. Then you've got spell damage +1 in a 1 attack 4 health form. Druid, not usually that good. You're not going to want to put it in a Malygos deck. This you would want to use potentially if you're playing a Swipe or a Starfall. So yes, it could be in some instances very good in that, and the flexibility helps there. Next you get a 4/2 Rush. Great if you want to deal 4 damage to a minion. Yes, that can be quite good. And finally you get a 1/6 Taunt. So each of them in their own right are good, pretty decent cards for the mana cost. They kind of give you that flexibility and options to play, but none of them are kind of game changing in my opinion. None of them are like, you don't build a deck and then suddenly say, wow, I need to put War Druid Loti in this to make it much better. It's kind of a sort of flexible card that you could put in potentially any Druid deck to kind of have this flexibility, but I don't really see any of them being that strong. Finally, if you play this in Wild with Fandral Staghelm, which is the legendary, which makes your choose 1 effects trigger twice, well, instead of actually being able to choose, you actually get an amalgamation of all of them, and you get a 4/6 Beast, which has Taunt, Rush, Poisonous, Stealth, and Spell Damage +1, which is pretty interesting. But that only happens in Wild, it won't affect Standard. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.